The snow had started falling early that December, soft flakes tumbling past Elena's window as she tied the final ribbon on the gift box. The faint scent of cinnamon candles filled her small apartment, mixing with the hum of Christmas carols playing from her old radio. Everything around her was wrapped in warmth and light, but inside, her heart fluttered with a strange mix of hope and ache. She looked at the box sitting on her coffee table, a small square parcel wrapped in deep green paper and tied with a red silk bow. It looked simple, but it held months of longing woven carefully into every thread of the scarf she had made for Ryan. Each night after work, she had sat by the window knitting it, imagining the way he'd smile when he unwrapped it, how he'd loop it around his neck, and maybe even send her a picture wearing it. It wasn't just a scarf. Tucked beneath the folds of soft wool lay a small silver key, the spare to her apartment. She'd placed it in a velvet pouch, next to a handwritten note that read, "For when you're ready to come home, not for a visit, but for good." Ryan had moved to Chicago 3 months ago for his new job, and while the distance was hard, Elena had believed in them. They had been together for nearly 4 years, weathering everything from his late night shifts to her endless deadlines. As a designer, he'd promised they'd make it work, and she had believed him with all her heart. They had planned for him to come back for Christmas. He had even said he wanted to spend it just the two of us, like old times. But when he told her, a week before the holiday, that something came up at work and he couldn't make it, she'd forced a smile through the phone and said it was okay. Deep down, she felt something heavy settle in her chest. Still, she refused to let doubt spoil her love. That's why she'd poured herself into this gift, a little piece of her warmth to keep him close, even from miles away. She stood at the post office counter a few days later, the package cradled like something fragile, sending some love for Christmas. The clerk had joked, stamping the box. Elena smiled, the most important kind. That night, she texted Ryan a photo of the gift and wrote, "Something small to keep you warm. Merry almost Christmas, love." He replied a few minutes later with a simple heart emoji and "can't wait." For the next week, she waited for the call, the one she imagined would come on Christmas morning. She pictured his voice, bright and soft, saying, "You're amazing, Elle. I love it. I miss you." But the day came and went. The phone stayed silent. Elena spent Christmas evening alone on her couch, watching the snow gather against her window. Her untouched mug of cocoa had gone cold, and the fairy lights blinked lazily on the tree. She tried to convince herself he was just busy, maybe visiting family, maybe asleep. But the quiet pressed in on her like a held breath. When she finally went to bed, she whispered into the dark, "He'll call tomorrow." But the next day came and still, nothing. She had no idea, then, that the gift she sent with so much love was already on its way back to her, unopened, unwanted, marked by a single cruel stamp that would soon break her heart. The first week of January began with a bitter chill. The holidays were over, the lights in the neighborhood dimmed one by one, and the world slipped back into its ordinary rhythm. Elena tried to do the same. She told herself Ryan was just busy, that maybe he'd lost her number when he changed phones, that there was a good reason for the silence. But every day that passed made the excuses harder to believe. It was the third day of the new year when the knock came. She opened the door to find a delivery man holding a small cardboard box. Her heart lifted for a fleeting second until she saw the familiar handwriting on the label. Hers, her fingers trembled as she took it. The same green wrapping paper, the same red ribbon, only now creased and slightly damp from travel. But what froze her was the red stamp across the top, bold and merciless, refused by recipient, returned to sender. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The words seemed to blur before her eyes. She turned the box over, searching for some mistake, some explanation, but there it was again. His name, Ryan Matthews, his new address in Chicago. Nothing had changed except the cruel rejection printed in red. Elena sank to the floor, the box resting in her lap. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and her own unsteady breathing. She ran her thumb along the edge of the tape. The package was unopened, untouched. He hadn't even looked at it. Her first instinct was disbelief. Maybe he hadn't refused it. Maybe someone else at his building made a mistake. Maybe he hadn't even known it came. Her heart scrambled for any explanation that would hurt less. She reached for her phone and called him. Once, twice, 3 times, the calls went straight to voicemail. She texted him, "Ryan, I think there's been some mix-up. My package was returned." The message went through, but the grade delivered never turned blue. That night, she sat on her couch, staring at the unopened gift like it was a ghost of something she used to believe in. By morning, she couldn't stand the silence anymore. She opened her laptop, went to social media, and typed his name into the search bar. She hadn't looked in weeks. She had trusted him completely. The first photo that appeared was dated December 25th. Ryan stood beside a woman with chestnut hair and a radiant smile, their hands intertwined. Behind them glowed a massive Christmas tree in what looked like a cozy living room. The caption read, "My Christmas miracle read #new beginnings." Elena's breath caught. She scrolled further. More photos, more smiles, the same woman Chloe, her name tagged beneath every post. Each picture was another nail in the coffin of the life she'd imagined. He hadn't been too busy or too tired. He had simply moved on while she had been waiting, knitting scarves and writing love notes to a man who no longer cared. The sting of humiliation was sharp, but underneath it, something else began to stir. A cold, clean kind of anger. She looked at the box again, the one that had made its round trip of heartbreak. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled off the red ribbon and whispered to herself, "You refused it once, Ryan, but you haven't seen the last of it." The snow began to fall again outside her window, soft and quiet, but this time it didn't look peaceful. It looked like ashes. Elena spent the days after discovering Ryan's betrayal in a haze. The pain was raw, a dull ache in her chest that didn't fade with hot chocolate or long walks through snow. Dusted streets. Friends called, offering sympathy, dinners, and hugs, but she barely responded. Their words felt hollow against the pulse of betrayal that had settled like a stone in her stomach. And yet, somewhere beneath the hurt, a spark had ignited. She wouldn't beg, she wouldn't plead. Ryan hadn't just refused her gift, he had refused her. And now, Elena decided, it was time he understood exactly what he had lost. She remembered a post on social media a few days later. Ryan and Chloe were hosting a New Year's Eve party at his new apartment. Elena stared at the screen, a strange sense of calm settling over her. She didn't need an invitation. She needed an audience. Using a friend's name as a guise, she managed to secure one. She told herself this wasn't about confrontation. It was about closure. A lesson, a truth she wanted to deliver in the only way that mattered, without desperation, without tears, only quiet precision. Her first step was the package, the same one he had returned. She had kept it, untouched, stored carefully in her closet. Now she opened it again, the soft wool of the scarf slipping through her fingers. It smelled faintly of lavender, of home, of everything he had refused. She set the scarf aside and replaced the key with something far more deliberate. A small envelope rested where the silver key once lay. Inside was a note, penned with calm, deliberate handwriting. Some doors lock for a reason. It was short, almost cold, but there was an unmistakable weight to it. She also included printed screenshots of old messages. His promises of forever, his late-night reassurances, the plans they had made together. She placed them neatly beneath the scarf, folding them carefully so that he would see them the moment he opened the box. The rewrapping was meticulous. She made sure the paper was pristine, the ribbon perfectly tied. It looked inviting, innocent, like the gift of love he had once refused. But Elena knew that the contents now carried something far heavier. That evening, she dressed carefully, not to dazzle, not to attract, but to carry herself with quiet authority. She wanted Ryan to recognize the change in her, the woman he had underestimated, the one he had discarded too easily. She paused at the front door, her hand resting on the box. A mix of nerves and anticipation pulsed through her, but she reminded herself that this wasn't about him. It was about her reclaiming her own power, her dignity. She was no longer waiting by the phone, no longer sending messages into silence. She was the one delivering the message now. The snow outside glinted under the streetlights as she stepped into the night. carrying her carefully wrapped truth. Every step toward Ryan's apartment was deliberate. A beat closer to closure, a beat closer to freedom. Tonight, she would return the gift, but this time she would do it on her terms, and this time he would have no choice but to see it. The party was in full swing when Alina arrived. Warm light spilled from the windows, spilling onto the snow-dusted sidewalk, and the muffled hum of laughter and music floated out into the cold night. She paused for a moment, drawing in a steady breath. This wasn't about nerves. This wasn't about fear. This was about presence. Inside, the room was filled with chatter and clinking glasses. She spotted him immediately, Ryan, laughing, his hand resting lightly on Chloe's back. The same Chloe from the social media photos. He looked up briefly, and for a second, his eyes met hers. Then confusion replaced recognition as he realized she had come alone, carrying a single, perfectly wrapped gift. Chloe, standing nearby, offered a polite smile. "You're Alina, right? I've seen your name," she trailed off. Alina smiled warmly, her voice calm, steady. "Yes, that's me." She didn't elaborate. She had nothing to explain. Nothing to apologize for. Her strength now spoke louder than words. Ryan froze as she approached, the green box cradled in her hands like a fragile jewel. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. "I think this is yours," she said softly, extending the gift. Her tone carried no bitterness, only quiet authority. "It got returned once, but I thought I'd deliver it personally this time." He hesitated, his fingers brushing the ribbon, as though touching it might undo what he had done. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he untied the bow and lifted the lid. The scarf lay there, soft and inviting, but beneath it, the envelope and the printed screenshots waited. His eyes widened as he read the note first. Some doors lock for a reason. Then the screenshots, his own words, promises he had made, all neatly laid out for him and everyone else in the room to see. A hush fell over the crowd, Chloe's smile faltered, whispers spread like wildfire, Ryan's face drained of color, his earlier confidence evaporating. The gift, once a symbol of her love, had transformed into a mirror, reflecting his betrayal in stark, undeniable light. Alina watched quietly, her heart steady. The hurt from Christmas morning still lingered, but it had been replaced by something far stronger, clarity. She had given him one last chance not to mend things, not to apologize, but to recognize the consequences of his choices. She turned, her scarf trailing lightly against her coat, and walked toward the door. The night air embraced her as she stepped outside, snowflakes settling softly in her hair. She paused for a moment, looking back through the window at the stunned faces she left behind, and allowed herself a small, quiet smile. No longer did she feel the weight of rejection. The return of her gift had been the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. One in which she was free, whole, and unbroken. Later, she posted a picture on her own social media. The empty space under her Christmas tree, the box gone, the scarf returned to her closet, captioned simply, "Sometimes returned gifts are blessings in disguise." Alina walked through the snow-dusted streets, each step light, each breath crisp. She had loved deeply and lost, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more certain of her own worth. Ryan's refusal had been cruel, yes, but it had also been the catalyst for her awakening. And as the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, she realized she no longer carried the burden of someone else's choices. She carried herself, and that, she knew, was the greatest gift of all.